Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving right into the incredible, often overlooked machinery of Indian state governments. We're going to totally bypass that dense constitutional jargon and just map out exactly how these power structures operate and interlock. So here's our quick roadmap for today. We'll start with the anatomy of the legislature, look at the governor's role, step inside both the Vidhan Sabha and the Vidhan Parishad, and wrap up by comparing the two houses side by side. Let's get into it. Section 1. Anatomy of state legislatures. Right off the bat, the Indian Constitution is remarkably adaptable. It gives states two main setup options. You can have a unicameral system, meaning the state operates with just one house, the Legislative Assembly. Or, if they prefer, a state can opt for a bicameral system. That basically just means having two distinct houses, an upper house and a lower house. To put that into perspective, out of the 28 Indian states today, only 6 currently use that bicameral setup. The rest, they function perfectly well with just one. Committing these 6 to memory, we're talking Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Telangana, and Uttar Pradesh, is a really great way to solidify your mental map of the current political landscape. But with that broad architectural structure in mind, it begs a pretty important question. Before we zoom in to look at the specific legislative houses, who actually sits at the very top of this entire power structure? That brings us to Section 2, the governor's vital role. So the governor acts as the absolute constitutional head of the state. And interestingly, they aren't elected by the local public at all. Instead, they're appointed directly by the President of India for a 5-year term. To even be considered for this gig, a candidate has to be an Indian citizen, at least 35 years old, and they can't hold any other office of profit. Basically, they serve as the stabilizing anchor for the whole state government. To make this a bit easier to digest, let's chunk their massive responsibilities into categories. On the executive side, the governor is the one who officially appoints the chief minister and their council of ministers. Then, looking at the legislative side, they wield the power to summon or formally end legislative sessions. And crucially, they can issue ordinances. Those are essentially temporary laws enacted when the legislature isn't actively meeting. Now, this next part really illustrates the sheer breadth of their authority. Building on those legislative powers, the governor also holds immense financial control. Like literally no money bill, which deals with taxes and state spending, can even be introduced without the governor giving it the green light first. Plus, they hold some pretty profound judicial powers, like the ability to grant pardons or commute sentences for state-level offenses. Okay, so now that we know who sits as the constitutional head, we have to ask the next logical question. Where does the direct voice of the voters actually enter into this equation? Let's find out in Section 3, inside the Vidhan Sabha. To give you a clear sense of scale here, the Constitution caps a state's legislative assembly at a maximum of 500 members. On the flip side, there's a general minimum requirement of 60 members, though that can fluctuate just a bit depending on a specific state's population size. To earn a seat in this incredibly powerful house, you've got to be an Indian citizen and at least 25 years old. But the absolute key takeaway here is direct election. These members are voted in directly by the public under universal adult franchise for a standard 5-year term. Actually, scratch that. Keep in mind that this house is subject to dissolution before that term is up, totally depending on the political climate. This house is honestly where the heavy lifting happens. The Vidhan Sabha holds exclusive, absolute financial power to pass the state budget and handle money bills. What's more, they keep the executive branch in check through highly impactful mechanisms like no-confidence motions. Literally, if the government loses the confidence of this specific house, they fall. It's really that simple and that powerful. But what happens when a state wants to, double-check its work? For those 6 specific states we talked about earlier, what structural option do they have when they want a secondary review mechanism for their legislation? That leads us right to Section 4. Inside the Vidhan Parishad. A great mental trick here is to just think of the council, the Vidhan Parishad, as the steady, older sibling to the assembly. Unlike the assembly, the council is a permanent body. It cannot be dissolved. Instead, its members, who have to meet a slightly higher minimum age of 30, serve staggered 6-year terms. Basically, 1/3 of them retire every 2 years, which guarantees a continuous, unbroken operation. Check out the complexity of their composition. It's pretty fascinating. They aren't directly elected by the general public at all.
It's this highly precise mix where exactly 1/3 are elected by local bodies, another third by the Legislative Assembly itself, a 12th by teachers, a 12th by graduates, and then the final slice is nominated directly by the governor for specialized expertise in fields like science, literature, or social service. It's quite the patchwork. However, despite that incredibly intricate composition, the council's power is strictly limited by design. They cannot topple the government with a no-confidence vote. They have absolutely zero say over money bills. And for regular, everyday laws, they can ultimately only delay a bill for a maximum of 4 months. Oh, and if there's a deadlock, there is no joint sitting. The Assembly's will is always going to prevail.
Section 5. Comparing the two houses.
When we put their structures side by side, the contrast is pretty stark. The Vidhan Sabha represents the immediate voice of the people, directly elected, temporary, and fully dissolving every 5 years. The Vidhan Parshad, on the other hand, is totally insulated from immediate political waves. It's indirectly elected, permanently functioning, and serves as a continuous body with those staggered 6-year terms. Looking at the true distribution of power, the whole dynamic heavily favors the Vidhan Sabha. They exert absolute control over the state's finances. Meanwhile, the Vidhan Parshad is basically powerless on financial matters, restricted to merely delaying a money bill for a maximum of 14 days. It's really more of an advisory delay tactic than true opposition.
And honestly, nothing highlights this power imbalance more than this single fact. Ultimately, the very existence of the council depends entirely on the assembly. The Constitution grants the Vidhan Sabha the absolute power to pass a resolution to either create a Vidhan Parshad where one doesn't exist, or just completely abolish an existing one.
Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating final thought to chew on. If the upper house can only delay laws, can't touch financial bills, and exists literally at the mercy of the lower house, is having a bicameral state legislature actually a vital safeguard against hasty legislation, or is it just an unnecessary procedural expense? It's a massive debate at the very core of state governance.